The wooden rungs were slick beneath his fingers. Each step upward pulsed with anticipation. The static in the air prickled louder in his ears the higher he climbed. Up ahead, the amber glow pulsed brighter in rhythm with the electric tension in the air. Cade gritted his teeth and pushed upward, the ladder creaking faintly beneath his weight as he rose through the tight shaft. After several meters, he spotted it. The light wasn't coming from above. It bled through a sidewall up ahead, dim at first, then flaring as another pulse of static charged the air. Cade stopped at the level where the glow spilled through the wood, narrowing his eyes as he turned his attention toward the source. The ladder continued up into darkness, but the light came from a nearby stretch of wood that looked wrong in texture. Unlike the rest of the smooth shaft, its surface bulged, warped, and fractured. Splinters curled outward from hairline cracks like something had rotted from deeper within. Cade reached out, fingers trembling from the hunger he felt cloying from every cell. That same deep cellular pull, the gnawing sense that something vital was just behind that wall. He held the ladder with one hand, braced his feet, and drove the other into the rotted wood. It tore like wet paper. Fibers peeled away in strips, damp and pulpy. The scent of rot hit him immediately, but he paid it no mind. The glow flared brighter and brighter as the static in the air surged in intensity. Then, as if a switch was flipped, Cade was left in complete and utter darkness. A moment later the thunder crack of lightning echoed from below, rattling through the shaft. Cade flinched, blinking in the sudden black, heart pounding. The glow and the lightning? They have to be connected. His fingers dug in again, peeling away chunks of soft wood in the dark. The sidewall gave way easily, crumbling under his urgency. The glow returned, faint at first, then swelling slowly again into visibility. Dim amber light returned to the shaft as Cade tore away the last of the rotted wood and pushed through. The space beyond was small, much smaller than he'd expected. He crawled in and had to hunch over, his head nearly brushing the low, uneven ceiling. Like the shaft he just came from, this chamber felt grown rather than built. Its walls warped inward as if the tree had reluctantly made room for whatever occupied this pocket. The air inside was dense with that same static feeling he felt outside. Every breath sent faint prickles across his tongue and down his throat. The amber glow filled the chamber. Cade's eyes fixed on the center of the room. A single drop of glowing amber hung suspended from a narrow protrusion in the ceiling. The growth tapered down to a blunt tip where liquid trembled as it gathered mass, slowly swelling, its glow waxing brighter with each passing heartbeat. Directly beneath it, growing up from the floor, was a lightning bolt made of wood. It rose jaggedly from the chamber floor as if frozen mid-strike. Splintered angles shot upward in irregular paths, edges serrated and raw like freshly broken heartwood. The grain twisted along visible channels in the wood. At the top, the bolt opened into a shallow, naturally formed basin. The drop above swelled further. As it did, the amber light intensified, flooding the cramped chamber. Static crawled across Cade's skin, popping faintly in his ears. His hunger surged again, sharp and confused, tugging at him from every direction at once. What does my body want here? He wondered, unsettled. The drop trembled then fell. It struck the basin with a soft, wet plink. The amber liquid vanished into the wood as if swallowed. Veins ignited instantly, starting at the basin's rim. Red flared first dark and visceral, spreading outward in branching lines. Beneath it, orange bloomed, then yellow, then dark green, before finally changing to a deep cobalt blue, each color lighting in sequence as the glow raced downward through the wooden bolt. For a heartbeat, the chamber was washed with color. Cade stared, awe cutting through his hunger for the briefest moment. Then the entire structure flashed violet. The light drained downward in a smooth, decisive flow until the chamber was pitch black. A fraction of a second later Cade heard the crash of lightning below. He stood frozen, chest tight, ears ringing. Then understanding clicked into place. This is it, he thought. This is what's doing it. The pulses of lightning outside had to be traced back to this small, hidden chamber and the impossible construct growing from its floor. The glow returned faintly as another drop began to form overhead, barely enough to illuminate the jagged silhouette of the wooden bolt. Cade swallowed hard, eyes locked on it. Before the next cycle could complete he sent out an identify. Storm sap crucible, a heartwood construct that collects volatile sap. Its channels align the sap, transmuting it into volatile lightning. Warning, unknown corruption detected. Cade let out a slow breath. This couldn't be natural. How could a natural growth take the tree's raw sap and turn it into violent lightning strikes below? And why? Then again he was inside a corrupted dungeon in the tutorial after being abducted by an all-powerful system. His view of what was normal or natural no longer represented his new reality. He leaned back against the chamber wall, careful not to scrape his head on the low ceiling, and forced himself to ignore the hunger and think instead of taking hasty actions. With no leech snapping at his heels and no immediate threat bearing down on him, he had time to mull the problem over. As he did, the pieces began to line up. The second elder had sent him and Pearl to the Great Tree Trials where Pearl would be tested in the 3 paths the frogs followed. The mist-filled maze had led to this tree. That had to be the trial meant to test mist weavers. Assuming that was true, this had to be the location that would test Stormcallers. The frogs had said he lacked affinity for their paths, but Cade wasn't convinced anymore. Not after the way his body had drained the lightning from the storm seed. Not after the way his body was reacting now, how it pushed him to launch himself at the storm sap crucible and somehow consume the power coming from it. Was it the result of the body tempering he went through right before meeting Pearl? The hunger inside him was coiling tighter, making it harder to concentrate. Cade slid down into a seated position, legs crossed awkwardly in the cramped space. The cold wood beneath him vibrated faintly as another drop of sap began to swell overhead. He watched it grow, pulse by pulse, amber light reflecting off the jagged edges of the wooden bolt below. The drop fell and the wooden bolt lit up with a rainbow of colors. Red flared, followed by orange, yellow, green and finally blue before the entire storm sap crucible flared with violet and then darkness. When the colors flared he felt nothing. No buzz crawling through his body like it had with the storm seed. Just static in the air and the echo of distant thunder below. Cade frowned. Another drop formed and he watched it cycle through again, more intently this time. Still he felt nothing but the hunger inside of him. His body still urged him towards the crucible. I must be missing something, he muttered. Then he remembered he hadn't felt a connection to the storm seed either until he made physical contact with it. He hesitated only a moment before leaning forward and extending one hand. Carefully, he placed it near the top of the crucible, just beneath the shallow basin where the red veins had ignited before. He waited and a few moments later the next drop fell. The instant the red veins lit, Cade gasped. A buzz erupted in his fingertips, sharp but controlled. Energy slid across his skin and sank deeper, settling into his bones as a gentle vibration. His hunger eased just a little before roaring back as the red faded and the orange veins lit below. The buzzing disappeared before he could fully grasp it, slipping away as the energy flowed onward through the crucible. That worked, but it wasn't enough, he whispered. He watched the remaining colors ignite in sequence, felt the hunger claw at him as the energy passed beyond his reach, down the tree, and into the stalactite waiting below. The glow faded and again he was plunged into darkness. Even in the dark Cade stared at the storm sap crucible with a burning behind his eyes. His understanding wasn't complete yet. But this was a step in the right direction. He had a theory now. If he wanted more, if he wanted all of it, he'd have to make full contact with every part of the crucible and take it. Cade shifted forward and wrapped himself around the crucible. The jagged bolt pressed into his skin as he made contact, but thankfully it was solid enough to lean against without bending. Using the growing light of the forming drop above, he pressed himself to the strange wood, adjusting until his body was braced against its twisted length. One palm pressed near the top where red first lit, the other against the lower section that had pulsed orange before. His forearm touched the vein that had once run yellow. His chest met green while his legs wrapped around the section that would glow cobalt blue. He felt exposed and, for a moment, he second-guessed this decision. The sap above him trembled, swollen and golden, casting warped shadows along the chamber walls. The drop detached and the moment it struck the basin, Cade felt it. The red veins flared and his hand sang with energy. It crawled through his skin and into his bones again, so vivid and full it nearly made him gasp. Then orange lit beneath his other hand, but the energy didn't enter. The buzz was there, but it was different from the red, a strange hum that didn't meet his body's natural rhythm. The light continued to descend through the crucible. When yellow lit up, a new vibration stirred where his forearm pressed against the wood, a higher-pitched buzzing that set his skin tingling. But again the energy did not transfer into him. It just continued on into green and down into blue. Each section buzzed in its own unique frequency that sang through his skin but refused to enter. Cade felt the final shift as the full spectrum flared and then collapsed inward into violet. A burst of deep purple light, color, and charge drained downward. Then came the thunder from below, muffled but still immense. Cade remained pressed to the crucible, breathing hard, every inch of his skin was now tingling with static. The hunger inside of him grew more intense. He felt like he was so close. The energy from the red channel had easily flowed into him and effortlessly merged into his bones, but the others hadn't. Instead, they had resisted entering his body. But why? He exhaled slowly, calming his pulse and willing his ever-growing hunger to wait. He needed to focus. If he could just focus, he could figure this problem out. For the first time since he had created the skill, Cade willingly triggered his hyper-focused meditation. The hunger gnawing at the fabric of his very being slipped away. His thoughts cleared and the chamber narrowed. All that remained was the storm sap crucible, the drop of sap above, and the breath in his lungs. Cade closed his eyes and opened his mind to the sensations of his body. The next drop formed overhead, glowing stronger, swelling with every pulse. Its weight bent the narrow ceiling root until gravity pulled it free. It fell into the crucible and red ignited. This time he felt the flow of the energy as part of it moved through his hand and into his bones. A frown formed on his mouth as he realized that he only took a fraction of the energy. The majority of it still flowed down through the crucible. Then it was cut off as the red channels faded and orange flared to life. But in his focused state, Cade felt it. A new hum that was only slightly off from the previous. Like a musical note just out of tune with the one before. He didn't fight it. He didn't command it to change. He just sat there and let it ring through his body. Time seemed to stretch. Within hyper-focused meditation, Cade floated in a chamber of light and tension, each heartbeat separated by miles of sensation. The red lightning that had resonated and flowed into his bones was gone. But now orange was singing to him. His other hand buzzed, but it wasn't the same frequency. It was sharper, tighter, like a plucked wire held too taut. Cade felt the resonance hum against his skin but not through it. His body didn't reject the energy, they simply didn't match. My own frequency is off. The orange light dimmed and yellow surged in next, lighting up his forearm. The buzzing shifted again. Higher and brighter than before. This feeling was more nimble. It was fast and agile. Speed and motion were coiled inside the buzz. Green followed. Its tone was deeper than the others, mellow and rooted. A grounding force, calm beneath his ribs. Blue struck last and created a rumble in his thighs that felt like it somehow tied the rest together. Cade's mind catalogued every shift in tone, every flicker of energy that passed over and through the crucible. Each segment rang out its own unique note. This is a scale, he realized. The storm sap crucible wasn't just a conduit, it was a song. A living sequence of aligned resonances, each layer flowing into the next, transmuting as they went. Cade had only absorbed the red because it matched his body's base frequency. But the others, they could be learned. Then he felt the entire crucible flash violet and the note that rang out nearly broke his mind. A screeching and discordant sound reverberated through him and shattered the harmony that had been created. He knew immediately that something was wrong, that this one didn't belong. The sound strained his mind and it took everything Cade had to just withstand the assault. Then, as quickly as it had come, the sound cut off. The crucible flashed and discharged down below. Even through his hyper-focused meditation, Cade reeled from the experience. His head pounded, and his body trembled with aftershocks, but he didn't move from his position wrapped around the storm sap crucible. Its twisted shape still pressed against his skin, every inch of him buzzing with lingering dissonance. Through the pain, through the uncontrollable shaking, his hunger surged. It had tasted power, and now it demanded more. Cade forced himself to breathe. The crucible was pressed against him, its jagged wooden form molded beneath his limbs and chest. Static crawled across his skin in faint, restless currents, and every nerve still hummed with residual resonance. The harmony he had felt moments ago was fractured by that final note. It left him disoriented and unsettled. Whatever that violet lightning had been, it wasn't just another note in the crucible's song. His thoughts brushed against the warning from his identify unknown corruption detected. The other colors had flowed, aligned, and resonated with him. Each note belonged, each one fit into a greater whole. But Violet had attacked. It hadn't sought harmony or balance. It hadn't invited resonance. It had pressed in, sharp and invasive, carrying a discordant demand rather than a pattern. Cade grimaced, jaw tightening. The thought pulled at something deeper. He had a quest to cleanse the corruption in Cynthia's legacy. And suddenly, uncomfortably, the question formed on its own. Was the violet part of that corruption? The idea sat heavy in his mind. The crucible was ancient, woven into the great tree itself. The other colors felt purposeful. Like foundations laid long before he had ever arrived. But Violet felt different. Like something grafted onto a cycle that hadn't originally included it. If the crucible was corrupted, though if all of it was tainted, then staying here, feeding from it, could corrupt him too. His hunger surged in response to the thought, sharp and insistent, clawing up from his cells with renewed urgency. It didn't care about corruption or quests or consequences. It only knew that power was here and it was close enough to taste. Cade clenched his fists against the crucible's wood, breath steady but strained. No, he decided. Not all of it is wrong. The harmony of the first 5 notes still rang true in his body. They didn't resist him. They didn't try to take control. Whatever the violet lightning was corruption, intrusion, or something worse, it didn't negate the rest of the song. And if it was corruption, then this was exactly where he needed to be. He couldn't cleanse something he didn't understand. He couldn't face it later if he ran now. And his starving body was already telling him the truth in the only language it had left. He needed more. The chamber brightened faintly as another drop of sap began to form above. Cade drew a slow breath, steadying the war between hunger and caution inside his chest. He would keep going. Cade's focus snapped back into place. The ceiling root trembled, amber light swelling at its tip as the sap gathered mass. The crucible beneath waited. He inhaled slowly, steadying the tremor in his hands. The drop fell. Red flared first, and the familiar hum rippled into him and through his bones. Cade let it pass through him, feeling its steady, grounded resonance. The majority of the energy moved through the crucible's channels, only a fraction had entered his body through his contact with the crucible. Orange followed sharper, more tightly wound. Yellow shimmered next, quick and darting. Green settled in after that, low and anchoring. Blue rolled through last, deep and distant, like thunder heard from underwater. Then came violet. The shriek tore through his mind again. Cade clenched his teeth, forcing himself not to recoil and lose his focus. The discordance scraped across his thoughts. It was as if his mind was dragged over broken glass. He endured. The crucible discharged and thunder cracked below. Darkness returned to the small chamber. Cade exhaled slowly through his nose, jaw trembling. That had been manageable. Barely. Again, the glow returned. Again, the drop formed. Again, he listened and observed. Cycle after cycle passed like this. Cade remained wrapped around the storm sap crucible, breathing through the pain, absorbing the song piece by piece. Each time, the notes became clearer, more distinct. He could feel where one frequency ended and another began, where the transition smoothed or sharpened. Eventually he could anticipate the shift. Red always came with that deep, bone-level steadiness. Orange followed with tension, like a taut line pulled tight. Yellow flickered like thought or motion itself, fast and elusive. Green grounded it all, slowing the flow. Blue gave it weight and depth. But violet always screamed. Cade learned to brace for it. To wall it off. To keep the harmony he'd built over the course of each cycle from collapsing beneath violet's intrusion. His hunger pressed harder with every cycle, clawing against the mental barriers of hyper-focused meditation, but he did not let it through. He no longer wanted the energy out of desperation. He wanted to claim this song and make it his. The next drop was already forming. Cade didn't shift his grip or adjust his position. His body knew where it belonged now. Each point of contact aligned with a specific tone, a color, a pathway waiting to be tapped into. The sap fell and red lit the crucible. Cade drew it in naturally, without effort. The trickle of energy flowed straight into his bones and settled there in a faint, steady vibration. Orange followed. This time, Cade did not wait passively. He focused on the buzzing in his left hand and willed it to shift just enough. He bent his internal resonance, nudging it toward the crucible's tone instead of forcing the energy to bend to him. The change was subtle. And then, orange lightning flooded into him. Not a violent torrent, but a powerful spurt of electricity surged through what little muscle mass he had left. He felt it flow through tendons and ligaments and the strange, ash-carved channels edged through his body from the baptism he'd endured. The energy burned hot and tight, reinforcing and tearing at the same time, as if testing every structure it passed through. Cade hissed softly through clenched teeth, holding the alignment. Before he could adjust or analyze too deeply, orange faded and yellow ignited. Cade shifted his body's internal resonance again, this time through his forearm. The resonance there wavered, then snapped into alignment. Yellow lightning rushed into him, lighter, faster than orange. It raced along thinner lines, slipping through his body with startling speed, touching everything but lingering nowhere. It was gone almost as quickly as it arrived. Green came next. Cade focused on his chest, on the steady rhythm beneath his ribs. He altered his internal buzz and matched the tone. The moment he did, a deep thrumming filled his torso, as if his heart had found a second, heavier beat layered beneath the first. Before he knew it, green faded and blue flared. Cade felt the deep vibration in his thighs where they wrapped around the crucible. This one resisted him. The frequency was heavier, slower to respond. He strained, shifting his internal rhythm again and again, until finally, blue lightning surged into him. It shot up his spine and burst through his mind like a cold, electric tide. For a heartbeat, Cade's perception expanded outward, the chamber stretching, the tree itself seeming to pulse around him. And then it was gone. The sudden absence left him slightly disoriented, but he still knew what came next. The crucible flashed and the violet shriek tore into him. Only this time, he reached for it. Pain exploded behind his eyes as he willed his internal buzzing to shift, to contort itself toward that impossible frequency. The sound was wrong, twisted and jagged, but Cade forced himself to follow it anyway. His body's resonance warped violently and purple lightning flooded him. It was not gentle or controlled. It crashed through every part of him, tearing through channels and structures alike, ravaging whatever lay in its path. Cade bit down on a scream, his vision fracturing into shards of violet and white. It felt like the lightning itself was fighting him, demanding he yield to it. But Cade refused. He pitted his will against it, not trying to dominate the energy but simply endure it, to hold it inside himself without breaking apart. The pain was unlike anything he'd felt before. Then an instant later the energy was gone. The crucible discharged and thunder rolled through the tree from below. Cade remained motionless, cradled against the storm-sapped crucible. Through the veil of hyper-focused meditation, he took stock of himself. Pain laced through every part of his body. His bones felt soft, not like they would bend, but like they'd dissolve if pressed too hard. His muscles, what scraps remained, tensed and twitched with leftover energy. His nerves sizzled with aftershocks, while his skin buzzed like a struck drumhead stretched too tight. His heart thudded in an irregular rhythm, hard and insistent, like it didn't know how to slow down. Worst of all, his mind refused to still, thoughts racing along the same channels the lightning had carved into him. And yet he felt proud. He had done it. He had altered his body's internal resonance to match every note. Even the violet. The crucible had played its song, and Cade had not just observed. He resonated with each note, even if only for a moment. Even if only partially. He had drawn real power from each stage in the process. Still, none of that mattered to the hunger that now screamed for more. It clawed at him from the inside out. No longer subtle. No longer something he could rationalize. It was cellular. A biological imperative written into every inch of his altered flesh. He had tasted power. Just a fraction from each stage. And now his body wanted to devour it all. The next drop began to form above. Cade didn't bother trying to keep track of how long he'd been here. Time slipped sideways in this place, each cycle blending into the next. The sap dropped, the crucible ignited, and Cade forced his body to resonate with the notes over and over again. As the cycles came and went, Cade found that changing his internal resonance came easier and easier. He didn't have to guess when each body part needed to shift as the notes became familiar, almost like muscle memory. Every time the sap fell, he shifted his body's resonance in tandem with the crucible's energy. Every time the energy flowed, he matched it faster than the last. And every time the violet crashed through him, he held on a little longer. After each cycle, Cade used the moment of darkness to assess. He was learning the pattern. The shape of the storm. And with every cycle, even as his cells screamed and his nerves lit up in protest, he pulled in just a little more. But still it wasn't enough. The hunger remained, growing stronger with each drop. As if the more he learned, the more precise his resonance became, the more potential his body sensed, and the more ravenous it became. He lost count of the cycles. His entire world was the pulse of the sap, the flare of energy, the shifting notes of the crucible's song, and the way it all tried to tear him apart as he fought to hold it inside himself. But with each cycle, he knew one thing with growing certainty. He was getting closer. Closer to being able to take it all. The next cycle began like the others. The sap drop gathered above, trembling with potential. The crucible waited. Cade steadied his breathing and prepared to resonate, already shifting his internal rhythm to meet the coming red. But this time, something was different. When the drop struck the basin and red lightning ignited in its channels, Cade didn't merely align with it. He reached for it, wrapping his will around the flow of energy and pulled. The effect was immediate. Instead of slipping through him in a controlled stream, the red lightning surged into his body. The faint hum in his bones became a roaring vibration that shook him to his core. Cade gritted his teeth as the force flooded deeper, denser, heavier than anything before. His bones sang in harmony with the red lightning, but they couldn't handle this level of intensity. He could feel microfractures forming as the vibrations intensified, tiny stresses propagating through his skeletal structure like cracks spider webbing through glass. Pain flared, sharp and relentless, but Cade didn't let go. He clenched his jaw and pulled harder, determined to claim every last fragment of that red lightning before it could slip away into the crucible's orange channels. The crucible resisted. For the first time since he'd begun harmonizing with it, the flow hesitated. The channels in the wood flared brighter, the red veins thickening and pulsing as if struggling against his interference. Cade snarled under his breath and pulled again. The red lightning poured into him in a final surge, overwhelming his senses, until there was nothing left. The crucible's red channels went dark. Cade remained frozen in place, heart pounding, breath coming in ragged gasps as he waited for the familiar transition to orange. But it never came. No orange light flared into the channels below. Just darkness and silence. He waited, listening for the distant thunder of a discharge that never arrived. The tree around him remained quiet, as if the storm itself had been cut short. A strange mix of exhilaration and unease twisted in his chest. I did it, he thought. I took it all. But had he broken something in the process? Slowly, cautiously, Cade shifted his awareness inward. His bones felt wrong. Like they carried a weight he couldn't quite describe. Like something dense and humming had been layered into them. The pain was there, yes, but beneath it lay something else. Before he could explore the sensation further, a faint amber glow bloomed above him. Hunger washed through him as another drop of sap began to form above. The drop fell and red channels ignited again. Cade did not hesitate. He drew the red lightning into himself immediately, using his will to pull it into himself, trying to replicate what he had done moments before. To absorb all of it before it could flow onward. And it worked. The red lightning flooded into him in a violent torrent, and this time his bones screamed. The vibrations were far stronger than before, the stress on his already damaged structure multiplying catastrophically. Cade gasped as a sharp, splitting pain lanced through him. Then another and another. Cade felt cracks racing through his bones like fault lines ripping open under seismic strain. He felt something give inside him, a sickening shift followed by a cascade of snapping sensations that made his vision blur. A strangled cry tore from his throat. The red lightning continued to course through his skeletal frame, each pulse shattering weakened points and grinding fragments against one another. Even through hyper-focused meditation, the pain was overwhelming. Cade realized dimly, through the agony, that he had gone too far and there was no stopping it now. He tried to scream but no sound came out. The red lightning ravaged his body, coursing through shattered bones that could no longer contain it. Every pulse sent fresh waves of agony tearing through him, a relentless grinding as fractured pieces vibrated against one another, flaring pain through every nerve like a cascade of breaking glass. He tried to will the energy out of his body. To push it back into the crucible. Nothing happened. The lightning did not listen to his command. It surged and twisted through him, obedient only to the path of least resistance which, now, was everywhere. Panic rose, sharp and choking. I took too much. The thought barely formed before it drowned beneath another wave of pain. Even with his eyes closed, Cade's vision fractured into bursts of red and white. His jaw trembled, teeth chattering uncontrollably as he struggled to stay conscious. The red lightning showed no sign of fading. It battered his broken skeleton again and again, as if determined to reduce every fragment to dust. Cade's mind reeled, searching for anything to hold onto. But his body could only take so much and he felt his awareness beginning to fade. The pain began to blur. The edges softened into a distant roar, a crushing pressure rather than 1,000 distinct wounds. His thoughts slowed, heavy and fogged, as if sinking beneath deep water. But one feeling refused to fade. Hunger rose through the ruin of his body like a cold flame, steady and inexorable. It did not recoil from the destruction. It did not mourn what had broken. It demanded more. A new surge of red lightning slammed into him and Cade realized dimly that the crucible's cycle had restarted. The sap had fallen again. More energy was trickling in and his body, shattered as it was, had nowhere left for it to go. His hunger flared as the trickle of red lightning entered his body. Only one thought, one instinct, remained in Cade's mind. He needed to feed. If he was going to die here then he would not die starving. The thought cut through the fog with terrifying clarity. Cade's will found the incoming red lightning at his palm. He didn't coax it or align with it. He seized it. With a raw, desperate act of will, he yanked. The energy tore free from the crucible's channels and flooded into him, joining the remnants of the previous cycle still raging through his broken frame. The chamber plunged into darkness as the crucible went inert, robbed of its discharge. Cade convulsed as the red lightning tore through him unchecked, with no structure left to contain or guide it. He should have died. Every instinct screamed that this was the end. And yet, through the storm of pain, through the chaos of power and ruin, a whisper surfaced in his mind. Control it. Guide it. Reforge what was broken. The whisper lingered in his mind. Not as a voice anymore, but as an idea that was painfully obvious in hindsight. Control it. Guide it. Reforge what was broken. Cade clung to that thought as red lightning continued to churn through his ruined body. The pain was still there, vast and all-encompassing, but it no longer owned him. For the first time since the crucible had torn him apart, his mind was ahead of the storm instead of drowning inside it. He had been passive. Complacent. He had let the lightning run rampant through his body. From the moment he had first absorbed lightning, he had let it do whatever it wanted inside him, trusting that hunger, body tempering, and raw power would sort things out on their own. He had assumed that if his body craved something so deeply, then consuming it must be beneficial. That assumption had shattered along with every one of his bones. The crimson lightning was not kind. It was not careful and when left unchecked it destroyed indiscriminately. He had let it ravage him, let it tear him apart under the foolish belief that endurance alone would carry him through. If he survived this and that was a big if then it wouldn't be because the lightning had decided to spare him or his body could passively endure the torment. It would be because he forced them to work for him instead of against. Cade shut everything else out. The pain. The hunger clawing at every one of his cells. The distant pulse of the crucible as it began yet another cycle. All of it faded beneath the weight of his focus. He turned inward and reached for the red lightning. It answered immediately. The sheer intensity of it nearly overwhelmed him. It was everywhere at once, raging through shattered bones and torn channels with violent insistence. As Cade connected his will to it, the energy reacted not yielding, but resisting. It writhed and surged, bucking against his attempt to shape it, as if offended by the notion that something as weak and fragile as him could tell it what to do. It continued its rampage, searching for bones to resonate with. There were none left. His skeleton, once the anchor point for the crimson lightning, was shattered into millions of tiny fragments. The lightning churned restlessly, unable to find what it wanted, growing more violent by the second. Fine. If it wanted bones then he would give it bones. Cade abandoned brute force. He stopped trying to crush the lightning beneath his will and instead changed his approach. Domination wasn't working, but the voice inside his head hadn't told him to dominate. It told him to guide. He narrowed his focus down even more. The very tip of his right pinky finger. In his mind's eye, Cade pictured the distal phalanx in perfect clarity. Not as it had been when it was whole but as it was now. Shattered beyond recognition. Reduced to splinters, then to fragments, then to particulate dust drifting in the chaos of his body. He held that image steady, then he imagined the reverse. He imagined the particles drawing together into fragments. Then those fragments fusing into shards. Those shards knitting into the rigid structure that was the tip of his pinky bone. He pictured the bone reforming piece by piece. In every step of this process, he imagined guiding the red lightning as the tool that made this possible. He imagined the lightning fusing each piece together as if the bone were metal being welded back in place. Cade wrapped his will around that image and reached for the storm again. The red lightning bucked violently, but this time, Cade didn't force it. He guided it as a shepherd guides its flock. He opened a path, replaying the image again and again, imprinting the intent behind it. Here, he told the lightning. This is what you should do. This is the way. The lightning hesitated as if contemplating Cade's words. Then it began to calm, and for the first time since his body had shattered, Cade felt the storm begin to listen. Crimson red lightning surged toward the tip of his right pinky finger. Cade held his focus tight, teeth clenched against the pain still lancing through the rest of him. All he could do was hope that this insane plan would work. That the lightning wasn't just rampaging randomly. That he wasn't hallucinating a sliver of control while his body was destroyed from the inside out. For a moment, he couldn't tell. The pain was too loud. But then, something shifted. The pain in his right hand lessened ever so slightly and he knew that the tip of his pinky finger was whole again. His breath caught. It worked. This wasn't just his imagination. He'd done it. He had guided the lightning, and it had listened. Relief bloomed inside him but he quickly crushed it before it could distract him. This was only one bone down. There were 205 left to go. He didn't have time to celebrate. Not with red lightning still roaring through his body. Not when his skeleton was still a ruined wreck. Cade took the lesson from the pinky and scaled it up. He focused on his left femur, the biggest, thickest bone in his body, and again conjured its shattered state in his mind's eye. He held it there. Then overlaid a second image, the femur whole, reforged by the red lightning and perfectly healed. The lightning responded immediately. It roared down his leg and Cade nearly screamed from the shock, but he quickly refocused to guiding the lightning, showing it the way. And like a raging current funneled into a narrow channel, the red lightning surged where he wanted it to go. He felt particles pulling together, strands of bone forming and rebuilding. The pain in his thigh vanished in an instant, replaced by a deep inner rightness he hadn't felt since this started. Cade suppressed a choked laugh. I can't believe that actually worked. But there was no time to laugh or marvel at his odd accomplishment. 204 bones to go. He fell into a rhythm. Each time Cade focused on another bone, the lightning surged. Each one was a mess that he had to rebuild. Tibia, radius, ulna, pelvis, spine, ribs, skull. Each time, he visualized the bone's destruction and then its reconstruction. Each time, the lightning responded with growing speed and less resistance, almost as if it wanted to be used. Cade's mind blurred into the process. His hyper-focused meditation kept his awareness crisp, time dilated enough that he could hold the images in place long enough to guide the lightning through each reconstruction. Twice more the crucible's cycle completed, and each time he drew in another wave of red lightning. Enough to destroy him all over again if he let it. But he didn't. As each bolt surged into his frame, he harnessed it. Directed it. Used it. And with every bone that fused back together, the pain receded. His body didn't just stop hurting, it felt right. More than that. It felt aligned and renewed. But even after the last bone had been reforged, something felt off. As if he were unfinished. Cade sat there, breathing hard, his skeleton whole again. The pain was gone but still, there was something missing. Like his bones were strong, but more fragile than they were before. Almost complete, he thought. But not quite. In the pitch black between cycles, Cade listened to his body. He could feel the edge of something just out of reach. So he waited. The sap overhead began to form. The amber glow returned, faint but building, and Cade knew this was the cycle that would finish it. The drop fell and red veins lit up across the crucible. Crimson lightning surged down into his palm. This time he didn't hesitate. He drew the lightning in knowing there was nothing left to rebuild. No, this time he would reinforce his skeleton all at once. He willed it into his bones again. Not to fix, but to fuse. To strengthen the repairs. To forge them into something better than they'd been before. And this time the lightning not only listened to his guidance. It welcomed him. The red lightning flowed into his skeleton like molten iron poured into a cast. It settled easily, naturally, becoming part of him. There was no pain or resistance. Just a growing warmth and an overwhelming rightness that washed over him. The hunger inside him quieted, just a little. And then came the system notification. Ding! Body tempering, Ash Tempest Confluence, unique, Stormweld Skeletal Reforge complete. Evolve race to Human E to continue skeletal strengthening. Your title Forged Body has been updated to Partially Reforged Body. Survive the first round of body tempering and reforge at least one component system of your body before core formation. Plus 5 endurance, plus 10 endurance. Plus 5% endurance, plus 10% to endurance. Plus 5 vitality. Plus 5% to vitality. Effect of endurance plus 10%. Cade stared at the screen, stunned. That was not what he had expected. Even with hyper-focused meditation active, he knew he didn't have the luxury of parsing it properly while still wrapped around the storm sap crucible. The chamber was already dim, the next cycle would come any moment. If another surge of lightning hit him while he was distracted. No. Carefully, slowly, Cade peeled himself away from the wooden lightning bolt that was the storm sap crucible. This time his body listened to his command. His fingers loosened their grip without resistance. His legs unwound from the crucible's jagged shaft. There was no locking sensation, no stubborn refusal from his muscles or nerves. His body listened to him again, responding to intent instead of drowning in a sea of pain. That alone told him something fundamental had changed. Cade backed away until his back brushed the inner wall of the chamber. He sank down against it, keeping his weight low as the growing amber glow overhead fell and the crucible cycled through once more. Only then did he allow his attention to fully return to the system message hovering in his mind. Storm-weld skeletal reforge complete. He let out a quiet breath he hadn't realized he was holding. After the madness with the storm sap crucible, something had finally clicked. Apparently, whatever had happened to him during the storm before meeting Pearl hadn't been the end of his body tempering. Sure, the system had acknowledged it back then, but now it was clear that recognition hadn't meant completion. He hadn't finished tempering his body like he originally thought. Instead, he had barely crossed the threshold for the system to recognize it. That much made sense, but the rest of it didn't make sense. Back when the system had first confirmed the Ash Tempest Confluence body tempering, it had unlocked the toughness stat. Cade had assumed that reforging bones of all things would naturally build on that foundation. In his mind, stronger bones made the body tougher. Instead, he'd gained an effect of endurance. Cade pulled up his status instinctively and filtered everything except what mattered. Endurance, 3240. His eyebrows rose. 8 points. Clean and undeniable. None of his other stats had changed. Strength, dexterity, vitality, and the rest were all unchanged since the last time he'd checked. Somehow, painstakingly reforging every bone in his body with red lightning had translated directly into a massive boost to endurance. And then there was the update to his title. Partially reforged body. That alone granted an additional flat bonus and percentage increase, pushing his endurance even higher than the stat change suggested. Cade did the math quickly in his head, lining up the flat bonuses and percentages. 40 endurance checked out. But then his eyes flicked upward to his resources. His health was not great. Well below half. Not surprising, all things considered. His mana was full, as usual. His stamina, though. Stamina points, SP 440/440. Cade blinked. That wasn't right. Before, his stamina had always been his endurance multiplied by 10. At 40 endurance, that should have kept him at 400. Instead, he had 40 extra points. A 10% increase than what he should have had. Cade frowned, then slowly nodded as understanding settled in. Effect of endurance. It wasn't increasing the stat itself, it was increasing what the stat did. Every point of endurance now counted for 10% more than it used to, which translated to more stamina. Of course this stupid-ass system would do it that way, he muttered softly, half amused, half exasperated. Why make it simple? He briefly wondered why the system even bothered separating effective bonuses from raw stats instead of just baking them in, but that was a question for a safer place and a clearer head. For now, the takeaway was simple. His body had more stamina and could endure for longer than before. Which was probably a good thing because Cade had a feeling he wasn't done breaking it yet. Now that the math checked out, Cade's mind turned to the more confusing part of the notification. Why endurance and not toughness? He mulled it over, dragging in a slow breath as he leaned back against the warped chamber wall. The red lightning had reforged every bone in his body. That much was obvious. His skeleton had been turned to dust, then rebuilt first particle by particle, then fragment by fragment, all the way back to completion. And yet the system didn't give him bonuses to toughness or even vitality. Endurance, Cade thought. Why does reforging my bones boost endurance? He didn't have to think long. Back during the initialization, the system entity had told him exactly what endurance governed. Endurance determines fatigue resistance, total stamina, stamina recovery speed, and internal bodily resilience. Cade was honestly surprised he remembered the line word for word after everything he'd been through, but it stuck. Probably because, until now, endurance had felt secondary. Important, sure, but not something he'd truly understood. But now? It made perfect sense. Stamina governed how much effort his body could output before crashing. He remembered vividly how it had felt to run out of stamina completely. When his muscles refused to move, when it felt like he'd lifted weights to failure and couldn't even stand. That helpless, burning fatigue. And what had just been reforged? His bones. The literal foundation of movement. The scaffolding on which muscle hung. The structure through which force traveled when he jumped, ran, or swung his fists. Not only that, but bones housed marrow. And marrow produced blood. Red and white blood cells, the lifeline of the body. Red cells delivered oxygen and nutrients to fuel every other tissue. White cells supported immunity. If the marrow was reforged, if his bones had been rebuilt stronger, purer, then it wasn't just structure he'd improved but also their function. Maybe his blood now carried oxygen more efficiently. Maybe it removed waste faster. Or maybe it did both. Maybe it did something he didn't even have words for yet. Whatever the case, the result was clear. His body could now hold more energy in the form of stamina. It even made a certain kind of poetic sense. His bones didn't just endure trauma. They adapted to it. They'd been broken down and rebuilt to survive it better the next time. That, he supposed, was what endurance really was. Still, there were a few things he couldn't shake. If his previous statements were true, then why didn't he also receive a vitality bonus? If his blood was more efficient, shouldn't that translate to better healing? Better life force? More health? The vitality he gained through the forged body title remained, but it didn't improve. Maybe vitality was governed by more than just his reforged bones producing improved blood cells. Then there was the line in the middle of the notification. Evolve race to human E to continue skeletal strengthening. That made him pause. His race was still listed as human G. So what happened to F? Did he skip it somehow? Or was F such a minor shift the system didn't even bother marking it? Had he reforged his bones in such a way that it forced an evolutionary leap beyond what came next? Or was there something else about the E stage that mattered more? Another part of that line tugged at his thoughts, continue skeletal strengthening. That phrasing. It didn't say anything about muscles or organs or nerves. Just bones. So does that mean, Cade wondered, the rest of my body can be reforged too? He looked up at the storm sap crucible and a slow grin crept across his face. He didn't know if this twisted conduit of energy could reforge his entire body piece by piece, but there was one way to find out. Cade stared at his hands, the dim light from the sap painting them in warm amber and murky shadow. They looked so thin, too thin. Skin stretched over tendon and knuckle, more bone than flesh. He flexed his fingers, felt the subtle tremor in the joints. Reforging his bones had left him stronger, more stable, more grounded in a way he hadn't expected. But now that the ache had faded, it only made what remained of him feel lacking. The hunger he felt never truly left. It still lurked inside of his body. It clawed from the inside of his skin like a second heartbeat. The crucible had fed it briefly, but not fully. He still felt that primal ache at the edge of every breath. It wasn't just in his bones. It was everywhere. Every cell, every part of him hungered for more. His gaze lifted to the storm sap crucible. It pulsed with familiar rhythm, the amber drop of sap above already swelling again. Another cycle was coming. Another opportunity. He couldn't stop wondering, could he use the other lightning colors too? Not just absorb them as raw energy to feed the hunger, but use them the way he had the red lightning. To reforge something deeper. His muscles, perhaps. His nerves. Maybe more. Each color had gone somewhere. The orange had rushed through his ligaments and muscles, invigorating and quickening everything it touched. The yellow had darted like quicksilver, elusive and electric. But the green and the blue he couldn't quite figure out, not yet at least. Was it insane to try again? Part of him said yes. His bones had shattered inside of his flesh. He had screamed and nearly lost consciousness more than once. What if next time it was his heart that failed? Or his brain? He had no healer here or anyone but himself to rely on. But the other part, the part shaped by his ever-growing hunger, was louder. This crucible was the best thing he'd found since landing in this hellhole of a dungeon. It offered him power, and not just in some vague, magical sense. Tangible power that he hadn't felt since that weird space the system brought him to during his race evolution from H to G. With it, he could reforge his body into one that could handle the storm. A body that could earn a system core, not just be given one like the other tutorial participants. He looked down at himself again, at his skeletal limbs, his gaunt chest, the hollow frame hollowed further by the ash during the impromptu baptism. This wasn't a body that would survive what was coming. It was a shell of what he was. He clenched his fists, watching the light from the crucible flicker across pale skin. No, he whispered. This isn't enough. He couldn't walk away. Not yet. The storm sap crucible completed another cycle in a wash of violet light before plunging the chamber back into darkness. Cade reached forward, both hands settling onto the crucible's jagged form. His palms planted along the familiar ridges where he remembered the orange veins lighting up. He didn't need to wrap himself around the whole thing. Instead, his aim was to focus on absorbing and utilizing one at a time. He had learned that lesson with Red, that he could absorb all of the energy from the storm sap crucible before it moved on to the next stage. A bead of amber sap began to form above. Cade exhaled slowly and triggered hyper-focused meditation. Time thickened. He felt his mind stretch, felt the world slow to a crawl. The growing droplet shimmered in the dim chamber like liquid gold hanging in stillness. It was almost beautiful. Almost peaceful. But Cade had no time for wonder. He had work to do. He recalled the feeling of the orange lightning. The way it had flowed through his arms and legs, coiling into the cords of muscles, ligaments, and tendons. If the red lightning had reforged his bones and enhanced his endurance, then this was the key to his strength. He would use this energy to rebuild the very tissue that the ash had devoured. The sap fell. It struck the basin of the crucible and red ignited, just above where his palms rested. He ignored it and let it pass without letting his body's natural resonance draw in any of the energy. Red faded and orange light bloomed underneath his hands. Immediately Cade felt the familiar buzzing, the specific hum that had always been just slightly out of tune with Red. He focused, tuning his will toward the vibration in his palms and fingers, willing his own internal frequency to match the crucible's. Orange lightning flowed into him. It wasn't a flood but a steady stream of vibrant, thrumming energy. Cade didn't waste it. In his mind's eye, he saw his body in layers. Muscle groups arranged in their complex networks. Fascicles bundled within each muscle, each one containing myofibrils. Each myofibril composed of thousands of filaments actin and myosin chains. Movement distilled into microscopic links that contracted and relaxed. And he imagined the orange lightning weaving through those chains, strengthening the filaments, reinforcing the connections. He pictured it lacing through his ligaments, binding them tighter, giving them spring and resilience. Through every tendon, down to the very fibers anchoring muscle to bone. Cade held the image like a Buddhist priest holds a mantra. Then he wrapped his will around the trickle of orange lightning and pulled. Not recklessly. Not like with the red. This time, he shaped his will into a funnel and guided the lightning into the framework of his muscles. He didn't let it rampage. Instead he directed it, threaded it through the image in his mind until the power followed his design. The crucible went dark and Cade's body spasmed. Every muscle in him seized, locking up in an instant. His hands clenched involuntarily, toes curling, chest spasming. For a moment he couldn't breathe. Couldn't blink. His whole body twitched as if struck by an invisible force. Then he gasped, drawing air into lungs that ached with effort. Orange lightning had poured into him. His muscles burned as if they'd been rewoven and left taut, vibrating with power just beneath the skin. He could feel that he was on the right track this time, but one cycle wasn't nearly enough to sate his hunger. Good thing the crucible was already preparing the next drop. Cade rode out the spasms, jaw clenched as his body trembled and twitched. Muscles locked, released, then locked again, firing in chaotic bursts as the last remnants of orange lightning burned through them. It wasn't pleasant, but it wasn't agony either. Compared to what the red lightning had done to his bones, this was tolerable. The next drop of sap fell and Cade waited until the red veins faded and orange lit up again. When it did, he didn't hesitate. He reached for it, matching the frequency more smoothly this time. The lightning poured into him, eager and hot, and once again he guided it into his muscles and connective tissue. His body spasmed, shoulders jerking, legs kicking against the stone floor, but he held the image steady in his mind. Cycle after cycle passed. Sap fell and orange channels flared to life before Cade drew it in and shaped it. Each time it became easier to harmonize, easier to pull more in quicker without losing control. His muscles responded faster, spasms shortening, movements growing more coordinated even as the lightning surged through him. The pain dulled into a deep, constant ache, like the aftermath of an impossible workout stretched across his entire body. His hunger, once frantic and clawing, began to quiet. As if each round of orange lightning filled in another missing piece, another hollow left behind by the ash. Time slipped past unnoticed as Cade focused on weaving his soft tissues with the orange lightning. He was relentless in his pursuit and he refused to stop until the system provided another notification letting him know that he had managed another successful reforging. Ding! Body tempering, Ash Tempest Confluence, unique, lightning-laced myofiber enhancement complete. Evolve race to human E to continue muscle enhancement. Your title partially reforged body has been updated. Survive the first round of body tempering and reforge at least 2 component systems of your body before core formation. Plus 10 strength. Plus 10 endurance. Plus 5 vitality. Plus 10% to strength. Plus 10% to endurance. Plus 5% to vitality. Effect of strength plus 10%. Effect of endurance plus 10%. Cade stared at the notification in the darkness, chest rising and falling rapidly. It had worked. The crucible had reforged his muscles and connective tissue the same way it had reforged his bones. 2 systems of his body were reforged by this miraculous lightning. A shaky breath escaped him, half laugh, half disbelief. This thing is insane, he murmured. His title had changed again. His stats had jumped again. Strength had been layered onto his frame alongside the endurance he'd already gained. He could stop now. Walk away stronger than he'd ever been. Stronger than he had any right to be. But as the amber glow began to form overhead once more, Cade felt it. The hunger. It was quiet when he was absorbing the lightning and reforging his body. But as soon as he was done it came roaring back to life. It was quieter than before but still there. Still wanting to consume more. Cade closed the system notification with a thought. There would be time later to dissect every number and bonus. Right now, the crucible was still active, still offering him something no one else could. He didn't know how long this storm sap crucible would continue its cycles but he was determined not to waste a single one. Besides, compared to reforming his bones, enhancing his muscles had been a breeze. If this trend continues, the next stage should be even easier. Cade lifted his hands and slid them down the wooden lightning bolt. Toward the channels that would soon glow yellow. Cade shifted his grip lower on the crucible's jagged frame, placing both hands firmly against the region where the yellow channels had flared to life during past cycles. His fingers traced along the notched edges of the wood until they found a section that felt right. He braced himself. Above, the next drop of amber sap began to swell. Cade closed his eyes and reviewed everything he remembered about the yellow lightning. It hadn't been like the red, slow and resonant, or like the orange, vibrant and powerful. No, this one had been fast, thin, and precise. The trickles he had absorbed before had raced through his body in jittery arcs, refusing to be held or channeled. Every time before, he'd only managed to absorb it in part before it raced away again. This time would be different. The drop fell. Red lit up first. Cade felt its hum but didn't reach for it. Orange followed, and again he ignored the pull. His hands were positioned for one purpose, and he would not stray. Then yellow struck. The note was high-pitched, urgent. Cade reached for it with his will, matching the frequency with as much precision as he could muster. The buzz snapped into sync, and lightning surged through him like a floodgate had been ripped open. Cade's body seized. His limbs jolted and his chest spasmed. Every nerve fired at once, then again and again, as the yellow lightning shot through his system. It was too much. Too fast. The power wasn't rampaging like the red had, it was darting, sprinting, rebounding between neural pathways. Cade's mind reeled, trying to follow its path. The lightning refused to be still. Then the numbness started. It began in his fingertips and spread inward, his body gradually losing its ability to feel where the lightning had passed. Cade blinked rapidly, forcing himself to stay focused. He wasn't being torn apart this time, he was being scrambled. It's my nerves, he thought, that's what this lightning is targeting. Not his muscles or his bones but the wires between them. The nervous system, the complex, fragile web that told his body how to move, when to breathe, and what to feel. And now it was being flooded. He called to mind everything he could remember about the nervous system. The basics were enough for now. Central and peripheral brain and spinal cord, then everything else branching outward. He remembered faint diagrams from class, nerve pathways that curled from the spine to the tips of the fingers, to the toes, across the jaw, down the neck. It wasn't much, but it gave him something to focus on. He turned his thoughts inward again, using his will not to fight the lightning, but to understand it. He tracked the pulses running through his spine, skipping across his limbs, bouncing chaotically from one point to the next. He reached out mentally to guide it, but the lightning slipped away each time. Cade cursed silently. He wasn't fast enough. But something else caught his attention, something that made him pause. The lightning wasn't touching his brain. It reached up to the base of his skull, tickled the top of his spine, but never crossed the final threshold into his skull. His brain remained untouched. So this was peripheral, mostly. Some contact with the central nervous system, but nothing deeper. And that gave him hope. Cade clenched his teeth and pulled his will into tighter focus. The yellow lightning was too fast to catch outright. How could he guide it if he couldn't keep up? Cade grit his teeth as another pulse of yellow lightning tore through his body like a live wire on the rampage. It sparked across his nerves faster than he could follow. Each attempt to corral it with his will failed before it even began. He couldn't trap it. He couldn't shape it. All he could do was react after the fact, and that wasn't good enough. Frustration pooled behind his eyes, a rising tide pressing against the edges of his skull. Why isn't this working? Reforging his bones with crimson lightning had been agonizing, but straightforward. Rebuilding his muscles with the orange had come with clarity, like each contraction answered a willing call. But the yellow? It was wild and slippery. Every time he got close, it slipped away. In the smothering dark, Cade narrowed his eyes. He wasn't going to catch it by force, that much was clear. So maybe it was time to stop chasing and start understanding. He let the yellow lightning rampage in the background of his awareness and turned his attention toward the storm sap crucible itself. There had to be a reason why it could channel the lightning so cleanly when his body was struggling to keep up. The next drop of sap formed above. He watched it descend in slow motion. His hyper-focused meditation magnified every moment as if time had stretched to meet his focus. The droplet didn't simply fall into the basin and dissolve. It was drawn in, sucked deep into the heart of the wooden construct. As the sap vanished, the veins of the crucible flared to life. Red first. Then orange. Then yellow. Cade studied the glowing channels with new eyes. He'd always thought they were simple grooves, just the means by which the lightning flowed. But they weren't. There were intricacies he didn't notice before. Beneath the colored glow, beneath the flickering reflections of energy, were patterns, tiny, complex geometries that curled and spiraled in mesmerizing configurations. Microloops and branching arcs, sharp angles nestled between flowing curves. It was like looking at a natural circuit board etched in wood, but one made of fractals and biological symmetry. The red channels had their own unique structure. When they faded and the orange ignited, Cade saw the microgeometry shift, subtle but distinct. A different weave. Orange patterns pulsed in broader strokes, like muscle fibers under tension. Then came yellow. The instant the color shifted, Cade focused intently on the glowing veins now alight in his grasp. The yellow lightning wasn't chaotic. It was meant to move fast. The crucible guided it through branching fractal paths that forked off from a thick, central line that reminded him of an organized highway to side streets. Or rather like a spinal cord to the peripheral nerves. Cade's breath caught. That's it. He didn't need to chase the yellow lightning. He needed to give it a reason to follow him. To offer it a path it preferred. In that final moment of light before his body pulled the lightning into himself and the room went dark, he committed the structure to memory. Every twist, every branching fractal pattern he could see, was held in his mind. Inside his body, the lightning rampaged unchecked. It bounced in all directions, no rhyme or reason to the pathways it took. Cade didn't try to catch it this time. He focused on his spine, tracing the vertebrae from his tailbone to the base of his skull. He imagined it as the central line of the crucible's yellow pattern. The thick, stable cable from which every branch would extend. And as he did, something shifted. Sparks of yellow lightning began to stick. Where they had once ricocheted off his spinal column, they now caught, snared by the image Cade held in his mind. The crackling energy gathered along his spine and began to flow up and down in a steady rhythm, matching the pulse he had memorized from the crucible itself. He kept the image stable, refining it, feeding his will into the path. More lightning followed. Dozens of disjointed arcs converged along his spine, accelerating, harmonizing, until every last bolt was cycling through his spinal column. The room remained dark, but Cade was alight inside. It's working. Now that the main line was established, it was time for the branches. Cade shifted his focus to the base of his spine and imagined the lumbosacral plexus, the major cluster of nerves that fed the lower back and legs. As soon as he did, the lightning reacted. Like water surging through a burst dam, it spilled down his legs in crackling waves. His lower body flared to life in a blaze of sensation. Numbness became fire. Tingling heat rippled down through his thighs, calves, and feet. The pulses didn't stop. They reached their ends and snapped back to his spine in looping circuits. More sap fell. More lightning surged. Cade took the next step. He focused on the nerves that led to his arms, the brachial plexus. The image in his mind expanded to include the branching nerves from his neck down to his shoulders, biceps, forearms, hands. The lightning obeyed. Fire threaded through his arms just as it had his legs, bursting out from his spine, curling down through every joint, every digit, and returning again in a seamless circuit. He could feel the change from chaotic turbulence to smooth flow. He held onto the shape as more yellow lightning poured into him. It joined the cycle already spinning through his body, spine, legs, spine, arms, spine again. The pain was still there, burning, pulsing, but it was focused. And yet, Cade could tell this wasn't enough. His chest and abdomen were silent. Fuck me, I forgot the thoracic nerves. He fixed the oversight in his mental map. New branches extended from his spine, wrapping his torso in symmetrical lines. As the map filled in, the lightning followed. Electricity sparked along the new paths. Every nerve ending in his body was lit. Every pulse sent from his spinal column returned. The cycle was complete, he just had to endure. The crucible continued to feed him and Cade continued to refine the process. But still, something inside of him whispered, not enough. He would need more. So much more. But at least he had a foundation. More yellow lightning surged from the crucible as another drop of sap fell from above. Cade was ready this time. His hands remained locked on the yellow-lit channels, and his will was already in motion. The lightning met no resistance. His nerves had become its new pathways, his spinal column the trunk, and the web of connections in his body its branches. He could feel the lightning coursing through his nervous system with exquisite detail now. And in that heightened awareness, something became clear. Something was off. He wasn't keeping all of the energy. Every time the lightning passed from his spine through the peripheries and back again, a little of it was lost as if it slipped away into the ether. Not all of it, but enough to notice. It wasn't like this with the red lightning. Once his bones had been reforged, the energy stuck. Nor was it like this with the orange, where his muscles drank the lightning and held it. But the yellow leaked. He had losses in his system. The same loss that occurs when electricity runs through bare copper wire. Without insulation, signals degrade. The energy bleeds out and transmission weakens. That's what's happening to me, he realized. My nerves are carrying the lightning, but they're not keeping it. Not fully. His nervous system had become a network of exposed wiring, efficient in theory, but vulnerable in practice. He knew that if he wanted to complete this round of reforging, he had to stop the loss. He had to shield his nerves. Insulation, Cade thought. That's what's missing. The myelin sheath. A protective layer. His vision was still dark and his body still trembled from exertion, but his mind was calm. He shifted the focus of his will. Lightning flowing through his nerves was not enough, he had to also wrap it around them, providing a form of insulation. He began with the spine. He imagined the yellow lightning as a film. A living conduit that would wrap his spinal cord like armor. It fought him at first. This lightning wasn't used to being bound. It wasn't like orange, which settled into place with weight, or the red, which obeyed once it resonated. The yellow lightning was slippery and energetic. It wanted to move. But Cade had learned. Don't fight it. Guide it. So he didn't force the lightning to wrap his spine, he invited it. He offered it a looping, spiraling path. He gave it a rhythm it could follow, then let it choose to follow the path. And it did. The moment the first wrapping took hold, Cade felt the shift. The energy loss along his spine dropped. The hum of the lightning within his spine grew steadier, deeper. He grinned. Now he had to repeat that process across every nerve in his body. From his neck to his fingertips. From his spine to his toes. Across his chest, through his abdomen, behind his eyes, and around his face. Each successful wrap reduced loss along that path. Each one made the lightning feel more stable. He moved methodically, refusing to rush, even as more yellow lightning poured in from the crucible's seemingly endless cycles. Slowly, painstakingly, Cade insulated his nervous system one pathway at a time. Every success made the next easier. His will learned the motion and the lightning became eager to follow. By the time he reached the smaller nerve clusters, those threading through his ribs and abdomen, the lightning no longer resisted at all. It accepted the wrap willingly, sliding into place as if it had been waiting for this all along. Still, Cade knew he wasn't finished. Each section was wrapped, but the system wasn't whole yet. The insulation existed in pieces. What he needed now was continuity. One uninterrupted lattice. And that would take every bit of mental focus he had left. Cade steadied his breathing and pushed deeper. He stopped thinking in terms of sections. Arms. Legs. Spine. Torso. Those divisions were useful for learning, but they were also artificial. The nervous system didn't care about boundaries. It was one unified structure, one continuous network of signal and response. So he pictured it that way. In his mind's eye, Cade stripped away the idea of individual nerves and replaced it with a single, branching whole. A luminous tree of pathways radiating outward from his spine, every branch connected, every filament part of the same living circuit. Then he willed the wrapping to tighten. Not around each nerve separately, but around the entire structure at once. The yellow lightning responded sluggishly at first. It strained against the idea, pulling at the old boundaries, trying to revert to familiar paths. Cade felt his concentration waver as the sheer scale of the task pressed down on him. This wasn't like reforging a bone or strengthening a muscle group. This was his entire nervous system, every signal line at once. His head throbbed and his vision flickered. But he didn't stop. Another drop of sap fell. More yellow lightning poured into him, and Cade folded it in instead of letting it race free. He fed it into the gaps, into the weak points, into the junctions where loss still occurred. Again and again as time dissolved. Cade lost track of how many cycles passed. He only knew the rhythm of the crucible, the pulse of sap, the surge of lightning, and the tightening of the lattice with each repetition. The yellow lightning grew denser, brighter, more cohesive as it wrapped tighter and tighter around his nervous system. The yellow lightning that wrapped his nerves began to condense. It became something solid yet flexible, firm yet responsive. A lattice formed around every nerve, reinforcing without restricting, enhancing without overwhelming. Cade's breath hitched as the sensation washed through him. The rapid flicker of lightning smoothed it into a steady flow, a continuous current that no longer bled away at the edges. Cade felt the moment the loss vanished completely. It was unmistakable. His entire nervous system thrummed in perfect alignment. Signals flowed instantly with no waste or delay. For the first time since he had begun this madness, his body felt precise. Every movement he imagined sparked instantly, clean and sharp. Every sensation registered with startling clarity. Ding! Body tempering, ash tempest confluence, unique, quick spark nerve lattice complete. Evolve race to human E to continue nervous system enhancement. Your title partially reforged body has been updated. Survive the first round of body tempering and reforge at least 3 component systems of your body before core formation. Plus 10 strength. Plus 10 dexterity. Plus 10 endurance. Plus 5 vitality. Plus 10% to strength. Plus 10% to dexterity. Plus 10% to endurance. Plus 5% to vitality. Effect of strength plus 10%. Effect of dexterity plus 10%. Effect of endurance plus 10%. The moment the notification came up, Cade tore his hands away from the crucible. Even though his body felt better than it ever had, his mind was tired and his willpower was strained. He sagged back against the chamber wall, chest heaving, every breath ragged and shallow. He had done it. This round was finished. And for the first time since entering the great tree, Cade allowed himself to stop if only for a moment. Wait. Seisha's voice cut across the clearing. Earl ignored it. The moment he saw the salamander coil and lift its head, his instincts took over. His blood surged hot in his veins and a grin split across his face. Finally, something worth fighting. The salamander stretched nearly 15 feet from snout to tail, crimson skin glowing faintly. Wisps of smoke curled from between its jaws as it shifted its weight. The cracked ground around it steamed where droplets of molten saliva hissed into the dirt. Seish shouted again. Earl! Wait, but he was too late. Rah! Earl exploded forward, boots pounding across the scorched clearing as he activated unbridled rage. The skill hit him like a tidal wave. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. His muscles tightened and swelled with power. The world narrowed to the salamander in front of him. He raised his axe high and brought it crashing down toward the salamander's spine. Sparks exploded where the blade struck. The edge skidded across the creature's superheated hide as if it had hit steel. Earl felt the vibration rattle through his arms. The salamander reared, its body flaring with sudden heat. Flames burst from the pores of its skin in a violent pulse. A wall of fire surged toward him. Earl grinned. "Come on then," he growled. The inferno rushed forward and slammed into a smooth wall of stone. An earthen shield rose from the ground between him and the salamander with perfect timing, flames splashing across its surface like water against a cliff face. Earl's grin twisted into a snarl. "What the hell?" The answer came a second later. "Slow down!" Sage barked from somewhere behind him. Earl's rage deepened. The audacity of that boy, daring to get between him and his kill? With a roar, Earl stepped forward and smashed his shoulder into the earthen wall. The hardened soil shattered under the impact, chunks breaking away as he forced through it like a battering ram. Dirt and stone scattered across the clearing. He swung his axe again but found only empty air. The salamander had moved and Earl was forced to play catch-up. He spun just in time to see the creature darting across the clearing toward Sage. Its jaws opened wide, rows of burning teeth flashing as it lunged for the mage. Sage reacted instantly. The ground surged upward beneath him, forming another shield of compacted earth just as the salamander snapped down. Crunch! The bite slammed into stone instead of flesh. But Sage wasn't finished. The shield rolled forward like a breaking wave of soil, swallowing the salamander in a tumbling mass of dirt and rock. In seconds the creature was trapped inside a compact sphere of hardened earth. Earl charged toward it. "Nice," he shouted. The sphere exploded. Fire erupted outward in a violent blast. Chunks of glowing red earth shot in every direction. Earl barely noticed the hardened clods hammering into his chest and shoulders as he ran through the debris field. His physical stats were high enough to absorb the impacts without slowing him down. Sage wasn't so lucky. Through the raining debris, Earl saw the mage take a fist-sized chunk of his own earth magic square in the chest. The impact knocked Sage straight off his feet, sending him crashing down to the ground. Earl didn't break stride. The salamander burst free of the collapsing soil prison, its entire body now blazing. Fire roared along its body, turning the creature into a walking furnace. Perfect! Earl leapt forward and slammed his axe down with both hands. Once again the blade failed to pierce the creature's armored hide. But that didn't mean the strike was useless. His axe had two ways of dealing damage. The blade and the weight behind it. Earl heard the crunch as the axe head smashed into the salamander's lower spine. The beast shrieked. Its massive tail whipped around in retaliation. Earl's instincts took over. He kicked off the ground and flipped backward, clearing the sweeping tail by mere inches. Mid-flip he caught sight of Sage just pushing himself upright. The tail kept coming. Wham! The tip of the salamander's tail slammed into the mage like a battering ram. Sage was launched backward, tumbling through the air before crashing down into the hardened ground a dozen feet away. Earl landed in a crouch. His rage boiled hotter. The salamander should be fighting him. Not the fragile little mage who clearly needed lessons on how to dodge. He surged forward before the salamander could recover. The creature twisted toward him, flames roaring from its body, jaws snapping wide enough to bite his torso in two. Earl didn't slow. He brought his axe down again with everything he had. The blade struck the salamander's back left leg with a brutal crack. This time the edge bit deep. Hot blood exploded from the wound as the axe nearly severed the limb outright. The leg hung half-attached, dangling by a strip of searing hot flesh as the salamander shrieked in pain. Boiling blood sprayed across Earl's arms and chest. It burned. He could feel it eating at his skin, sizzling where it touched exposed flesh. But unbridled rage swallowed the pain. Pain was irrelevant. Only the fight mattered. The salamander staggered as its damaged leg buckled under its weight. Flames flared brighter across its body as it tried to compensate, dragging the ruined limb behind it. Earl grinned through blood and smoke. "Yeah," he growled. "Now we're getting somewhere." He pressed the attack. The salamander lunged, snapping its jaws toward his head. Earl ducked under the bite and hacked at its legs again. The axe rang against its target once, twice. Then on the third swing. Chunk! The blade carved clean through the salamander's front right leg. The limb separated entirely, crashing to the ground in a twitching heap. The creature screamed. Without its front leg and with the rear one barely attached, the salamander's balance collapsed. Its massive body sagged to one side as it struggled to keep itself upright. Earl circled it like a predator, ignoring the heat blasting off the creature's body. Flames licked across his boots and pants, but he barely felt them. The salamander whipped its head toward him again, jaws snapping wildly. Earl leaned back, letting the teeth snap inches from his face. Too slow, he taunted. The creature lunged again. And then something unexpected happened. Crack! The ground beneath the salamander ruptured. A jagged spike of earth shot upward like a spear and slammed directly into the beast's open mouth. The spike punched deep into its upper palate, forcing its head upward. For a brief moment the salamander froze. With its head forced upwards, its throat was wide open. Exposed. Earl's eyes lit up as he saw the opportunity. Every muscle in his body seemed to wake at once. He planted his feet. His boots dug into the cracked earth beneath him as he twisted his hips. The movement flowed upward through his body. Every muscle fired in sequence like a perfectly timed machine. Power drove through his hips, his torso rotated, and his arms bulged as the axe came around in a savage horizontal arc. He could feel every part of his body contributing power to the swing, and the axe whistled through the air. Then, thunk! The blade buried itself deep in the salamander's exposed throat. For a split second there was resistance. Then the edge cut through. Boiling blood exploded outward, spraying across Earl's chest and face in a scalding wave. The salamander thrashed violently. Its remaining limbs scraped uselessly against the ground as the massive body convulsed. Flames flared wildly across its body before flickering out. The creature collapsed with a final shudder. Earl stood there for a moment, breathing hard, axe still embedded in the corpse. Ding! You have defeated Blaze Blood Salamander level 21. You have gained additional experience for killing a creature above your level. Race, Human F has reached level 16. +2 to all stats. Class Berserking Behemoth has reached level 15. Stat points allocated. You now have +2 free points to distribute. Class skill selection available. Class Berserking Behemoth has reached level 16. Stat points allocated. You now have +4 free points to distribute. Earl blinked through the notifications, then laughed. A deep, booming laugh that rolled across the clearing. Now that, he said, yanking his axe free from the carcass, was a hell of a fight. Even with the last embers of rage still humming through his veins, Earl immediately pulled up the system screen. Class skill selection available. Let's see what you got for me, he muttered. 5 choices appeared in front of him. More than he'd ever been offered before. He leaned closer, reading through them one by one. Rallying Roar, common. A shout that grants nearby allies a small, stacking boost to courage and slightly increases stamina regeneration. Guardian's Intercept, uncommon. Dash in front of an ally and take the next attack intended for them, converts a portion of the damage taken into stamina loss instead of bodily injury. Clarity through Rage, uncommon. Your rage is no longer all-consuming. When unbridled rage is active, the fury stays contained and deliberate. You keep your awareness, judgment, and self-control, allowing you to pick targets, read the fight, and make disciplined choices even at your angriest. Ember Bite Chop, rare. Your next swing ignites on contact, dealing additional fire damage to the target. Can ignite combustible materials. Last Man Standing, epic. When an enemy lands a death-dealing blow, you instead remain upright at 1 HP for a short duration. This effect consumes a large amount of stamina. While active, it amplifies the effects of unbridled rage. When the effect ends, you suffer heavy exhaustion. Earl let out a low whistle. Well damn. Several of those looked good. Really good. But one made him question why he received it as a choice at all. His gaze drifted down the list, focusing on clarity through rage. Why the hell would I want that, he muttered. The whole point of unbridled rage was the rage. He could let it take the wheel. Let it burn everything else away until the fight was the only thing left in the world. Why would he want to dilute that? He kept reading through the descriptions again, weighing his options as his pulse slowly began to settle and unbridled rage started to fade. The burning tunnel vision receded, replaced by the steady thrum of adrenaline. His eyes lingered on Last Man Standing. It was an epic rarity skill, something he hadn't seen before. It made his blood stir and he wanted to select it right away. Then he heard it. Earl. It was faint, barely audible. His eyes twitched. Earl. The interruption immediately irritated him. His fading rage surged back for a moment, hot and prickling. Who the hell is? He looked around. The clearing was quiet except for the cooling corpse of the salamander. Then he saw him. Sage lay several yards away still on the ground. The mage's dark complexion was pale, breathing shallow and uneven as he tried and failed to push himself upright. Earl blinked. Right. The mage. He closed the skill window without selecting anything and jogged over. Up close, the damage was obvious. Sage's breathing was ragged, each inhale shallow and tight. One arm clutched his side where the salamander's tail had slammed into him. Earl crouched beside him. You alive, little man? He asked. Sage glared at him like he'd just insulted his entire bloodline. What? The mage wheezed, do you think? Earl shrugged. Well, why are you still laying on the ground? That apparently wasn't the correct answer. Sage's face twisted in anger as he tried to sit up straighter. You absolute idiot, he snapped. I told you to stop. We should have assessed the creature. But no, you charged straight in like some brain-dead battle maniac. Earl scratched the side of his head. Hey! I had a strategy. Sage continued angrily. Positioning. Coordinated strikes. Have you ever heard of tactics before? Oh, did you? I figured we'd just wing it like every other fight we've had, Earl said honestly. Sage stared at him. Earl tapped his temple. Once the rage kicks in, things get kind of narrow. Sage let out a long, pained breath that quickly turned into a hiss. Earl watched him for a moment, assessing. Old instincts from his life as a Marine kicked in. Sage definitely had some bruised ribs. Maybe even broke a few. Yeah, Earl said after a moment. You probably cracked a few ribs. Sage's glare sharpened. Oh, is that all? Could be worse. Earl stood and offered a hand. Come in. Let's get you up. After a moment of stubborn hesitation, Sage grabbed his forearm and let Earl haul him to his feet. The mage immediately winced and leaned slightly against him. Easy there, Earl said. Sage steadied himself but still looked furious. Earl gave him a sideways grin. Mages are kinda squishy, hey. That did not improve the situation. Sage looked like he wanted to hit him. Unfortunately for him, breathing seemed difficult enough already. They stood there for a moment while Sage gathered himself. Finally Earl asked, so what's the plan? The mage hesitated then sighed. I might need a healer. Earl nodded. Yet I didn't want to say it but I agree. Sage clearly hated admitting it. He swallowed his pride and said quietly, Camp Persistence has people with healing abilities. Earl glanced back toward the swamp then back at Sage before he let out a sigh. I'll help you get back there, he said. Relief flickered briefly across Sage's face. But I'm not going inside. Sage frowned. I said I was leaving, Earl replied calmly. And I meant it. He adjusted his grip so Sage could lean against him as they started walking. I'll get you close to the gate, Earl continued. After that, you're on your own. Cade leaned back against the curved wooden wall of the hollow, letting his breath slow as he pried his hands off the storm sap crucible. The buzzing in his nerves faded to a dull hum, his body trembling from the effort of guiding the yellow lightning. His arms felt like stretched cords, every inch of him worn thin. And yet he had succeeded. He had reforged 3 parts of his body. 3 different types of lightning were now woven into his form. He had a moment now. A sliver of time to think. If someone had told him a week ago hell, even just days ago that he'd be in the hollow of a massive, impossible tree, reforging his body by absorbing elemental lightning formed from magic tree sap, he would have laughed in their face. And yet here he was. Thanks to the crucible and the storm sap that never seemed to run dry, Cade had reshaped his bones, rebuilt his muscles, and enhanced his nervous system. His title had evolved with each step, tracking his progress, strengthening him with each reforging. He looked down at himself. In the dim glow of the crucible's amber light, he could make out the difference. He wasn't the same skeletal husk who had crawled into this chamber. The ash had carved him down to bare necessity, leaving him nothing but brittle bone and taut skin. But now he had gained some of that muscle mass back. Not much, but enough to make him look like a person again. He flexed a hand experimentally. The movement was effortless. He wanted to test more, move around, feel the difference, but there wasn't enough space in the tiny chamber. And he wasn't keen on leaving, not yet at least. This place was a gift. A once-in-a-lifetime treasure trove of power and transformation. He would not leave it until his body was completely reforged or the sap ran dry. He exhaled, thoughts slowly collecting. So far, 3 components have been reforged. And if his hypothesis was correct, that meant he was just past the halfway mark. Cade's gaze flicked to the lower portions of the crucible, where the green and blue channels waited beneath the yellow. He couldn't say for certain what they would reforge, but he had guesses. Whatever parts of his body they would be drawn to would likely enhance his vitality and toughness. They matched the pattern of physical enhancements that had been set. But the final color, violet. He shuddered slightly, remembering the discordant buzz that had seared through his body the first time he felt it. He had no idea what that lightning would affect. No clue what part of him it would try to touch as it seemed to rampage throughout his entire body. But that was a concern for later. For now, Cade let his body rest, and his mind slowly settled. Before absorbing the yellow lightning he was set on racing through the process as fast as he could. He was both excited about the possibilities this treasure provided and worried the sap would eventually run dry. But the yellow lightning taught him a crucial lesson. He had no clue what he was doing, and if he kept running head first without a plan, the next stages of his body reforging might just rip him apart. As he rested he found the hunger that had once gnawed at him constantly, his strange, all-consuming need for more was weaker now. Not gone entirely, but dulled as if parts of him had been satisfied. Cade scooted closer to the storm sap crucible. He kept his eyes locked on the pulsing veins carved into the crucible's surface, watching the way they glowed as it cycled without his interference. His hands brushed along the crucible's midsection until they found the channels that matched the green lightning. He didn't activate his hyper-focused meditation just yet, he wanted to observe the patterns first. As the amber sap fell again, the cycle began anew. Red surged, lighting the upper veins with a low hum. Then orange bloomed below it, vibrant and strong. Cade kept his focus tight, watching how each layer of lightning transitioned into the next. The orange veins flared and fed their glow downward, draining into the yellow which branched like fractals along the side. That too faded when green began to glow. The crucible's transformation in this stage was different. Instead of lightning crackling immediately through long channels, Cade saw something far more intricate. A reservoir, deep inside the green section. As he stared he realized this reservoir was split into 4 separate but connected chambers. Each time a new pulse of sap-fueled energy came down from above, it filled the green chambers one by one, lighting them in sequence. First the top left pulsed bright, and then a beat later the energy shifted, drained, and lit the next. Cade watched as it cycled through all 4, again and again, the brightness intensifying each time. It was rhythmic, deliberate. Like a pulse. A heartbeat. That realization hit him like a jolt. This pattern, it mimicked the human heart. Each chamber filled, transferred, and pushed the energy onward. Once all 4 were glowing, a sudden spiderweb of thin green channels exploded outward from the final chamber, coating the rest of the green section of the crucible in radiant, glowing light. With each pulse, the web expanded and then dimmed as energy dispersed until the pulse started again at the first chamber. Cade narrowed his eyes, taking it all in. Just like with the yellow lightning's resemblance to his nervous system, the green section clearly mirrored his circulatory system. And if that was true, then the green lightning wasn't just going to his heart. It would travel through his arteries and come back via his veins. It would connect his entire circulatory system. The pulses continued a few more times, then the green glow slowly bled downward into the blue channels, and the crucible dimmed. Cade closed his eyes, committing every detail to memory. Compared to the wild, chaotic pulses of the previous sections, the green lightning's rhythm was calm, almost comforting. But Cade wasn't about to let that lull him into complacency. Every round tested him in a new way, and this one would be no different. With the crucible's pattern set in his memory, he activated hyper-focused meditation. His breathing slowed as he reached out and gripped the green channels on the crucible. Even in its dormant state, his palms tingled against the crucible's bark. Cade waited in the stillness, the dim amber glow casting long shadows across the wooden interior of the hollow. He quieted his thoughts and steadied his breathing. His heartbeat was slow, strong, and steady. Already, the changes from the earlier reforging sessions were apparent, and now he was about to push that even further. The crucible pulsed as the amber sap made contact. He felt the hum rise from within, and then the green lightning came. It wasn't violent. It wasn't wild or invasive. But it was overwhelming. A flood. A deluge of vitality that poured into him in wide, steady currents thicker and more voluminous than anything he'd felt before. He had braced himself for a trickle, a cautious stream of power like with the red or orange lightning. But the green lightning surged into him with soothing purpose. Cade gasped as it flooded his arms, crawled through his shoulders, and dove straight into his chest. His heart responded instantly, beating harder, stronger, with newfound urgency. Boom! 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 With each beat, the green lightning was dragged into the chambers of his heart and pushed through the rest of his body. Cade held tight to his mental image. The 4 chambers of the crucible's green reservoir became the 4 chambers of his heart in his mind's eye. He pictured each one lighting up in sequence. Deoxygenated blood came in through the right atrium, down into the right ventricle where blood then flowed to the lungs to become oxygenated. As he imagined the flow, the green lightning obeyed. It mimicked the movements of his blood. A pulse of green light surged toward his lungs and back. Cade could feel it as the lightning twisted through his pulmonary network. He was thankful that this time it didn't burn. He felt no pain. Once the blood had run through every single alveoli, it was drawn back into the left atrium and down into the left ventricle before being pumped out through the aorta. The flow reached the aorta and split, following capillaries and veins to every corner of his body. His limbs, his gut, his skin, every single cell in his body was connected to this flow. The green lightning spiraled through arteries and veins alike, painting his inner body with smooth, controlled pressure. It was elegant. Refined. It was life itself. In the silence, Cade imagined the full cycle again: heart, lungs, heart, body. Over and over. Each time the lightning returned to his chest it was dimmer, like it had given something up to empower him. That was fine. He had plenty more where it came from. Cade adjusted his grip on the crucible as the lightning continued to stream into him. There was no fire or numbness or shaking. Only the smooth rhythm of pure life energy flowing through his veins. Compared to everything that had come before, this felt gentle. Cade remained seated in the hollow, hands braced against the green-lit channels of the storm sap crucible as the next cycle flowed through him. The green lightning poured into his body again, steady and abundant, and once more it was carried by the rhythm of his heart. There was no resistance. No chaos to rein in. The energy simply fit. The harmony was easy to match. Each heartbeat sent waves of green lightning through his arteries and veins. Cade could feel it reinforcing the vessels themselves, strengthening their walls, smoothing imperfections, widening narrow passages. Blood and energy flowed together now, synchronized in a way that felt more natural than breathing. He paid close attention to his heart, half expecting the lightning to change it somehow. But it didn't. The heart endured the strain with ease, beating powerfully, efficiently, as if it had already been prepared for this task long ago. Which made sense, he realized. His heart was a muscle. And like all of his other muscles, it had already been strengthened by the orange lightning. The nerves that regulated its rhythm had been reinforced by yellow. The blood it pumped had been refined when his bones were reforged. This wasn't about the heart itself. It was about everything the heart connected to. The green lightning continued its work, flowing outward, reinforcing the vast network that carried life through him. Cade felt a deep, spreading warmth settle into his every cell, followed by a sense of quiet resilience. Breathing felt easier. Each inhale seemed to draw more from the air than before. Another cycle passed. Then another. Cade barely noticed the time. There was no pain to anchor him to each moment, no struggle to demand his full attention. He simply guided the flow and let the crucible do what he felt it was meant to do. When the green glow faded for the third time and the chamber plunged briefly into darkness, the system notification came through. Ding! Body tempering, Ash Tempest Confluence, unique, lifeline circulatory refit complete. Evolve race to human E to continue circulatory enhancement. Your title partially reforged body has been updated. Survive the first round of body tempering and reforge at least 4 component systems of your body before core formation. Plus 10 strength. Plus 10 dexterity. Plus 10 endurance. Plus 5 vitality. Plus 10 vitality. Plus 10% to strength. Plus 10% to dexterity. Plus 10% to endurance. Plus 5% vitality. Plus 10% to vitality. Effect of strength plus 10%. Effect of dexterity plus 10%. Effect of endurance plus 10%. Effect of vitality plus 10%. Cade sucked in a sharp breath as the message faded. That was fast, he murmured. He pulled his hands away from the crucible and leaned back against the wooden wall, heart still beating strong and steady. His hunger had dulled even further to just a faint ache. This round had gone smoother than he'd expected. But this time he went in with a definitive plan. He had learned the pattern from the crucible and mimicked it as best as he could. Many parts of him had already been reforged, which certainly helped accelerate the process. With the green lightning cycle complete and his hunger reduced to a low simmer, he knew the final stage was fast approaching. The blue lightning. The last color before the crucible flashed violet. He scooted back toward the storm sap crucible, being sure not to make contact. He studied the lowest section before the wooden bolt of lightning met the mound at the base of the chamber. As the crucible cycled, he saw a densely packed node of electric blue light flash. That node led to a straight channel which ran down to another node. That alone had seemed manageable. But what followed a moment later had thrown everything off. The second node had split into two fractal branches, curling outward like symmetrical wings. Mirrored complexity, each path twisting in impossible fractals. The patterns were so detailed, so intricate, that Cade's eyes had failed to trace their design. Even with the slight time dilation due to hyper-focused meditation, it was like trying to memorize a maze with shifting walls. It left him with more questions than answers. What was that structure supposed to represent? Was it something biological? Something abstract? A representation of energy or intent, or was it something else entirely? The green lightning had made sense. It had matched the heart and its 4 chambers, matched the flow of blood. But this? This was dense and cryptic. It didn't mirror anything Cade could immediately associate with his own anatomy. A second brain? No, he would have felt something in his skull. But he hadn't, not even during the yellow lightning cycles. The lightning had traveled up to the base of his neck but never breached into the brain itself. Now he was beginning to wonder why. He looked at the crucible again as another cycle flashed through. The green faded and that singular, tightly wound blue node flared to life once more. The brilliant electric blue core that pulsed with more intensity than any of the other colors. Its power condensed to a singularity before spreading down and fractaling out. It was clear that the crucible was saving the hardest for last. Fuck it. The words escaped before Cade could even think them through. He'd come this far, endured pain, walked the line between brilliance and madness, and reforged nearly every part of his body. Sure, he could stop now. He could walk away with gains in nearly all parts of himself. He didn't have to risk losing everything by drawing the electric blue lightning into himself and failing to mimic the impossibly complex pattern he saw before him. But in his mind, stopping now would be worse than failure. He shifted forward in the dark, planting both hands on the blue-lit channels of the storm sap crucible just as the sap began its cycle again. As the crucible flared red, orange, yellow, green, Cade steadied his breathing, narrowing his focus. When blue flickered to life, he matched its frequency. The resonance synced easily, but he kept a tight leash on it, shaping his will like a dam just barely holding back a flood. The lightning crackled softly into him, tentative, almost waiting for permission. Cade's brow furrowed as he let a controlled trickle of blue lightning enter his body. The deeper it flowed, the more he understood. It wasn't like the other colors. The red had hammered into his bones, the orange had flowed through muscle, the yellow had danced along nerves, and the green had pulsed through his veins. But the blue moved with a purpose. It arced between his bodily systems, linking them together, strengthening their signals and directing their flows. At first, Cade thought it was completing the others. But no, it was controlling them. Every time it looped through his body, the blue lightning returned to the same place, the base of his skull. And from there, it branched back out, reaching every part of him like a general giving commands to the troops. That realization sent a jolt of caution through Cade. His eyes snapped open, and he severed the flow immediately, forcing his body's resonance to fall out of sync. The lightning still inside him coiled at the base of his skull, a nexus of thought and power. Cade sat back, stunned. His brain. That was the next target. The next part of his body that needed to be reforged. Everything else had been preparation. This was the seat of who he was. His brain controlled everything, it held who he was as a person. Before the system came, most body parts could be replaced. Artificial hearts and robotic limbs weren't the norm, but they weren't rare either. The brain, however, that was one part of the body science hadn't yet been able to replicate. One wrong move in trying to reforge his brain and he would be dead. He weighed his options. He could leave now. His body was reforged, his stats enhanced, his hunger nearly quelled. But no, not yet. He couldn't leave the job unfinished. Not when the most important part of him was still untouched. So Cade closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and steadied his focus. During the next cycle, he would take the plunge. He would reforge his mind. Cade let the crucible cycle once more without touching it. In his mind, he held onto the image of the blue channels he had studied so carefully. The dense primary node. The straight conduit beneath it. The second node. And then the mirrored fractal explosion that had defied comprehension. He sat there picturing the pattern as best as he could, but he knew he couldn't sit here forever. At some point he had to take the plunge. Right before the sap fell again, Cade moved and grasped the section of the bolt where the blue fractals exploded outwards. He waited for the cycle, and once blue light shone underneath his hands, he matched the resonance and pulled. Blue lightning poured into him, sharper and colder than any of the others, and he guided it with ruthless determination. His will dragged the energy upward, past nerves and blood and muscle, until it gathered exactly where he wanted it. At the base of his skull. The lightning pooled there, dense and bright, a compact knot of power pressed against the junction where his spine met his brainstem. Cade didn't let it spread. He didn't let it wander. He fed more in until the crucible went dark. Using his will, Cade held the lightning in place. In his mind's eye, a node shone brilliant electric blue, compressed far beyond what felt safe. He could feel the pressure building as if the lightning wanted to explode outward and seize control. Not yet, Cade thought, teeth clenched. He shifted the image. From the node at the base of his skull, he imagined a single line extending upward. Not down like the crucible's channel, but up along his brainstem. He pictured the line building upward in a slow and controlled state. The lightning obeyed. It flowed upward in a narrow conduit, crackling softly as it traced the length of his brainstem and deposited into another node at the center of his brain. Cade felt it vibrate between the two nodes, now base of skull to midpoint of his brain, running up and down like a charged wire. His vision flickered. The sensation felt wrong, but he was resolved to push forward. The next step was the dangerous part, but he couldn't hesitate, he couldn't show weakness now. Cade inhaled and pictured the second node expanding. And from it the mirrored fractals bloomed. Blue lightning erupted outward into his brain, and pain slammed into him so hard his breath caught in his throat. The world shattered around him. Colors exploded behind his eyes. Scents flooded his senses: ash, rain, blood, ozone, memories he hadn't thought about in years. His skin crawled as phantom sensations rippled across his body. He felt ants under his flesh, heat and cold at the same time, pressure where there was nothing touching him. His brain screamed from the rush of sensations flooding into it. Before the system, it was said the brain couldn't feel pain, that there were no pain receptors in the brain itself. But what he was feeling now would beg to differ. Memories surged upward, half-formed and insistent. Faces. Voices. The moment the system had taken him. The ashen baptism. The frogs. Pearl's eyes. All of it tried to surface at once, threatening to tear his brain apart. Amid the flood of sensations, he noticed something new. Tiny motes of dull gold flickered into view in his mind's eye, scattered deep within the storm of sensation. They weren't lightning. They didn't burn or crackle or demand attention. They simply were soft, inert flecks drifting through the chaos like grains of sand suspended in water. Cade frowned inwardly, instinctively drawn to them. They felt familiar. Not as memories, exactly, but as impressions. Meaning without language. Understanding without words. The blue lightning brushed against one of the golden motes and it reacted. The mote flared faintly, threads of blue fractal energy wrapping around it, drawing it into the fractal pattern. Where the lightning touched, the chaos sharpened. The screaming noise of sensation resolved into something structured. Cade felt a sudden flash of clarity, not images or sounds, but intent. As if something buried deep in his mind had just been given a framework to express itself. Golden flecks began linking together, loosely at first, then more deliberately, each one caught and anchored by the expanding blue lattice. Cade didn't question it. He didn't analyze it. He simply allowed the connection, guided by instinct alone. The sensation reminded him, distantly, of the slick warmth that had coated his throat when he swallowed the second elder's strange golden mucus. Then the flood surged again, threatening to overwhelm the fragile connection. And Cade crushed it all down as hyper-focused meditation brought him back to the task at hand. However, the flood of sensations remained. Cade clenched his jaw and redoubled his focus. He couldn't afford to let himself get lost in the tsunami of sensations washing over him. He ignored the chaos and focused on the pattern, the mirrored fractals from the crucible. He visualized them branching outward from the second node in perfect symmetry, folding into the structure of his brain instead of ripping through it. With every heartbeat, he willed the fractals to expand and the lightning slowly followed. Each expansion felt like his skull was being split open from the inside. The blue lightning traced along folds and lobes, searing pathways that didn't exist before. Cade felt his thoughts stretch, reorganize, and sharpen against their will. Then the lightning began to thin. He felt it immediately, the power draining as the fractals expanded. The blue glow within him dimmed, the pressure easing in a way that felt wrong. Like he was being suffocated. No, Cade thought, panic edging in. Not yet, it can't stop yet. He slowed the expansion. Instead of pushing outward, he reinforced what was already there. He willed the lightning to thicken the existing fractal pattern in his mind. Willing it to stabilize instead of expand. The pain didn't fade, but it stopped escalating. Time dragged on and his brain felt starved, aching, as the blue lightning dwindled further. The patterns trembled. He knew it was unstable and was teetering on the edge of collapse. Then the crucible cycled again. Cade felt it before he heard it. Sap fell and energy flowed. When the crucible reached blue, he seized it without hesitation. Another torrent of blue lightning flooded into him, rushing straight into the lattice he had formed. It washed over the fractal patterns like icy water over overheated metal. It was simultaneously agonizing and relieving all at once. Cade gasped as clarity punched through the pain, and he willed for the fractals to expand again. To push further than he had before. Cycle after cycle, he repeated the process. He used the energy to build upon the complexity of the fractal pattern. When it began to dwindle, he would stop the expansion and stabilize what he had built. He reinforced every expansion as he waited for another rush of fresh crackling blue electricity. And with every fresh wave, the mirrored fractals spread across his brain, growing denser, more intricate, and more precise. Each pass edged deeper and deeper into the structure of his brain. He lost all sense of time. There was only the crucible, the lightning, and the unbearable focus of shaping his own mind. Cade did not stop. For all he knew, days or even weeks had passed. He had long since stopped tracking the passage of time, lost in the endless effort of shaping and sharpening his mind. The mirrored fractal pattern, the framework of electric blue threading through his brain, had become everything. His identity, his focus, his obsession. And despite the pain, despite the disorienting sensory flashes and the dizzying vertigo of forcing his own brain to reshape itself, Cade refused to stop. This was his brain. The core of who he was. The place where every thought, instinct, and memory was stored. If there was one part of his body he would not leave flawed, it was this. He could get by with muscles that weren't perfectly efficient. He could endure nerves that occasionally misfired. But his mind? That had to be flawless. It had to be strong enough to match the reforged foundation of his body, or else everything would fall apart. So he worked. Even after a system notification pinged faintly at the edge of his awareness, barely more than a whisper in the torrent of sensations he was experiencing, he ignored it. He didn't even pause. His will remained locked on the fractal lattice, continuing to densify and perfect it. Every branch had to be reinforced. Every mirrored split had to be symmetrical. Every loop had to hold. Only when he reached the limits of what he could do, when he pushed and the structure no longer responded, did Cade finally let himself stop. His brain was full. Every fold, every gyrus, every neural cluster thrummed with stabilized electric blue. The mirrored fractals coursed through him, wrapping and reinforcing every part of his mind. Only when there was nothing left to expand, nothing left to reinforce, and nothing left to stabilize, did Cade allow himself to stop. Just to be sure, he reached for the crucible's energy one last time, absorbed a final wave of blue lightning, and traced the entire lattice from end to end, checking every node, every mirrored path before gently letting the excess energy fade. His hand slipped from the crucible. His eyes opened in the dark. The chamber was still. The only sound was his breath, ragged and slow. His mind was quiet for the first time since the reforging began. Cade blinked a few times, then mentally nudged the dormant notification forward. It appeared instantly, projected across his vision in perfect detail. Ding! Body tempering, Ash Tempest Confluence, unique, storm-wrought cognitive matrix complete. Evolve race to human E to continue mental enhancement. Body tempering, Ash Tempest Confluence, unique, complete. Effect of toughness plus 10%. Your title partially reforged body has been updated to reforged body. Completely temper and reforge your body before core formation. Plus 10 strength. Plus 10 dexterity. Plus 10 endurance. Plus 10 toughness. Plus 10 vitality. Plus 10 intelligence. Plus 10% to strength. Plus 10% to dexterity. Plus 10% to endurance. Plus 10% to toughness. Plus 10% to vitality. Plus 10% to intelligence. Effect of strength plus 10%. Effect of dexterity plus 10%. Effect of endurance plus 10%. Effect of vitality plus 10%. Effect of intelligence plus 10%. Cade stared at it. His thoughts were slow and calm. But underneath that still surface, awe swelled within. Cade sat in the dark, staring at the notification. Holy fuck, he muttered. That was a long list of stat bonuses. He read through the notification again, slower this time. Intelligence plus 10%. After reforging his brain, an increase to his intelligence made sense. His thoughts did feel faster and more organized. Like his brain had been a cluttered library and someone had reorganized it with infinite shelves and perfect memory indexing. Then came the second message. Body tempering, Ash Tempest Confluence complete. Effect of toughness plus 10%. That one caught him a little off guard. He hadn't expected toughness to come from completing the whole tempering process, but the more he thought about it, the more it added up. The Ashen baptism had triggered this whole reforging ordeal. It made sense the system would recognize it as a total body trial and grant toughness accordingly. But then there was the title. Reforged body. It was a full system acknowledgement. A final stamp on the entire process. Cade had completely reforged his body before forming a core. The title reflected that and the bonuses were massive. Plus 10 to 6 stats and plus 10% to each of those stats was a huge boost for him. And yet something about it bothered him. There were missing pieces. The title didn't include anything for wisdom or willpower. That was strange, wasn't it? If this was his entire body, everything that Cade was, then why had the system excluded 2 stats entirely? Sure, wisdom and willpower were less tangible than things like strength or dexterity. They weren't clearly tied to any component in his physical body. But intelligence wasn't exactly a muscle group either, and it got a slot. He leaned back against the cramped chamber's inner walls, mind spinning. The omission stuck with him. Wrong in a way he couldn't shake. It wasn't just that the list would look cleaner with all of his stats included. It was this odd feeling deep inside of him. Beyond the forged muscles and mirrored fractals, there was something missing. And his hunger? It was still there. Quiet, but not gone. Like a gnawing whisper inside the very core of Cade's being. His eyes drifted back to the storm sap crucible. The sap dropped from above and the sequence began again. Red. Orange. Yellow. Green. Blue. Each section pulsed in turn, lighting the cramped hollow with the sacred circuit. Then the final flash of violet. A bolt of purple lightning lanced down into the depths of the tree. Cade's gaze didn't waver. He had reforged every system the crucible seemed to offer. Bones. Muscles. Nerves. Blood vessels. Brain. But even with all that power pumping through him, he still felt unfinished. The violet lightning wasn't just part of the crucible's cycle. It was the end of the cycle. The culmination. The lightning that had once threatened to tear him apart before the reforging had even begun. He stared down at his hands. He could feel he was stronger, faster, and steadier now. But was he ready for the final push? Was there even anything left he could accomplish here? Even the system had said his body reforging was complete. But still, even with the system's notification of completion, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't done. And the hunger twisting deep inside of him agreed.